Hi everyone. So 2017 is coming to a close, and that means it's time to check out the best native VR games of the year. And when I say native VR, I'm referring to games that were built from the ground up exclusively for VR. So I won't be covering games like Fallout 4 VR or Project Cars 2 VR, even though those are undoubtedly great VR games. With that being said, let's get started. First game on my list is Cosmic Trip. So Cosmic Trip is a VR RTS game where you are a general down on the ground building and controlling a robot army. So it has all of the classic RTS mechanics like base building, economy management, army building, controlling your army, expanding, supply caps, all that good stuff. I played a lot of StarCraft before I got into VR, and I've been looking for a good VR RTS game because I feel like VR is a great medium for RTS games, but unfortunately, most VR RTS games really dumb down the genre, or they just try to emulate PC RTS games where you're looking down and you're controlling things with a laser pointer as opposed to a mouse. In Cosmic Trip, you use room scale for everything. You build units by picking up a disc and putting it in a little slot in your bot factory, and then you can pick up the bots and throw them around. You place buildings manually using the motion controls, and everything is done with the motion controls, which is awesome. Even though it's pretty much the only VR room scale RTS, it still is the most complex RTS in VR that I've found. You have to build up an economy while building up your army to defend yourself against early attacks, and the enemies will even do things like try to sneak in behind you and directly attack your workers. So you also have to fight yourself by using little disc launchers or bubble guns attached to your tools that you use to control everything. It's not just about sitting at home at your base though, you do have to move out on the map. And to do that, you use a really cool mechanic where you pull up these portals and walk through them to move to the next checkpoint. You do have to move around and find special resource locations where you can harvest gas, which is a special resource that you use to get advanced units and upgrades. And you can only get it through these resource locations or through fighting enemies. So it's not just about sitting around in your base and macroing up. You do have to move around throughout the map. The point of the game is to move around and clear out all the enemy bases while claiming your own bases and eventually reach the core. So you control your army with a little interface that you can pull up that gives you classic RTS controls where you can select all your units and tell them where to move. The farther you get, the harder enemies you're going to face. They will take out your units, and then you can't just flip back to your base and build more because you are physically the guy on the ground. So when you do need to build more units, you usually just want to build a little forward outpost and start building a bunch of units right on the spot. So the game really rewards you for being good at multitasking and being able to switch between controlling your army, fighting the enemy army, and building up more units to keep your army strong. As you move through the map, you have to destroy enemy buildings, which spawn enemy units. So the enemy gets weaker and weaker as you destroy all their buildings. If you don't move out, the buildings are just going to keep spawning units and they're going to keep rushing your base. Eventually, you reach the enemy core, which is their main building, and has all sorts of its own defenses. You have to pull out all of the quarks in the core, and doing so will spawn a bunch of units that will attack you, so you better come with a huge army. You also have to deal with the laser beams that it shoots out, and you do have to dodge those in room scale. If you don't, you'll die and you'll lose the game. Eventually, once you've pulled out all the quarks, you will expose the brain of the core, and you can destroy it to win the game. So this game came out in early 2017 as a full release. It's been a while in early access, defense style game, but Once they added the strategy mode where you can move around the map and control your army, it really elevated it to the next level, and it became my favorite VR RTS game. Anyways, that has been Cosmic Trip. Now let's move on to the next game. The next game on my list is Left Hand Path. So Left Hand Path is a horror RPG game that takes heavy inspiration from Dark Souls. In this game, you play as a spellcaster, and you cast spells by drawing patterns in the air. There are a bunch of different spells that you can cast, and once you memorize all the different patterns, you can really do a lot of crazy stuff. So this is a single-player game with a fairly long campaign. In fact, I'd say it's one of the longest campaigns of any single-player VR game. It takes about 8 hours for your first playthrough. And you basically just run through this dark world, fight all sorts of messed up creatures, and kind of try to figure out the story as you go along by looking at bits and pieces of lore that you find. So it does take heavy inspiration from Dark Souls in the way you figure out the story, as well as the mechanics of experience and death. So when you die, you drop your husks on the ground, and husks are the form of experience in this game, and then you have to go back, fight through all the monsters that respawn, and collect your husks, and if you don't collect them before you die again, then you lose all those husks. So it can be very unforgiving, but very satisfying. It's also a horror game, so there are lots of scary creatures. There are these phantoms that are basically just the embodiment of jump scares. Luckily, they are pretty easy to kill. You just have to have the proper spells ready to face them. So I love the combat in this game. The gesture casting system is very accurate. It very rarely will misfire and cast a different spell than the one you want. And I also just love the atmosphere and all the mechanics of the game. Like in Dark Souls, as you travel through the world, you're trying to find these checkpoints. In this game, they're screaming heads, and they're sort of like the bonfires of Dark Souls, where you'll respawn there when you die, and you can also spend your husks on all sorts of upgrades. This game was made by a single developer, so it's not a perfect game. It does have the occasional bug, and it has some assets from the asset store, like these spiders. But overall, I really love the atmosphere of this game. I genuinely feel a sense of dread when I'm playing this game, and it's just very creepy and also very satisfying when you learn how to master these spells and cast some of the really complex ones. The game does have the full campaign with boss fights, with unique mechanics, and then when you beat the game you can also go back to all the old areas and fight them again with all your powerful spells, which is what I'm doing in this video. So if you want to check out the boss fights and stuff, then check out my playthrough highlights of this game. The most powerful type of spell is rituals. So you cast a bunch of different symbols in the different cardinal directions in order to cast extremely powerful spells. Like this one, which summons a whole bunch of exploding skulls that just fly around everywhere and attack everything, including you, so you have to dodge them and you're scared. I'm a big fan of Dark Souls, so the Dark Souls inspiration really sold me on this game. If you play Dark Souls, then you'll understand all of the leveling mechanics and the husks and the death mechanics. But even if you didn't, if you're just a fan of horror games, this is one of my favorite horror games as well, because it is a full-length RPG where you go through this big world and this big campaign. Unlike most VR horror games where you just kind of run through a house or, you know, the forest or whatever and you can't fight back. In this one, you can use a really fun combat system. I love all the different spells, and once you master it, you really do feel like you are this master wizard who can just tackle all the horrors of the world. So that has been Left Hand Path, and let's move on to the next one.
Welcome to
2MD VR Football is a football game where you play as the quarterback and you're running a 2-minute drill. So you're trying to drive down the field in less than 2 minutes to score the game-winning touchdown. And you can call 4 different plays, you can reverse the plays, and you can customize the plays. So I'm just cycling through my plays here, and I'm going to run a basic run right down the middle. Not very effective. Up next, I will try the option. And that's a little more effective, scores me a first down. And then, of course, you can just bomb the ball down the field. And one of the first things that really sold me on the game is that the throwing motion is really good. It really feels like you're throwing the ball. And I'm a big football fan, so I've been waiting for a good football game to come out, and I was really psyched when this game came out. The other really cool feature of the game is that you can customize the plays. So you can choose where you want the receivers and the tight ends to line up, and then you can actually draw the routes that you want them to run for the play. So I'm just drawing some random routes here, and then I'll throw on my helmet, jump into game, and we can see how this looks on the field. So you see the orange lines that represent the routes. And then I'm going to go ahead and throw it to the guy who's looping around behind. Score first down. That's a successful play. You can also do things like run it as the quarterback, run it down the sidelines, and then step out of bounds when you see the defenders coming to stop the clock. Just run it into the end zone here, and then I can watch the unique victory animation that my team has. Every team has their own field and their own victory animation. So this game, even though you play with a bunch of tackle dummies, it's actually pretty cool and complex, and it's very immersive. Like, I get really into this game, and I just I'm not even thinking about anything except like my plays and the clock, where the defender is. Not every play is a success though. If you are too risky with the ball, you can throw interceptions, and interceptions do burn a ton of time off the clock and push you back to the 20-yard line. So when I first started out, I would basically just blindly bomb the ball down the field pretty much every play, hoping to score a lucky touchdown. It's not really a good strategy, and it definitely breaks down in the later games. You have to play 7 games in a row, 7 2-minute drills, and for the last 3 you have to score 2 touchdowns instead of just 1. So an interception in those games is really killer. But as I kept playing, I actually got better, learned to read the defenses, look at where the defender is defending, and throw the ball exactly where it needs to be to prevent an interception and get a completion. So this is my best play. I'm editing it here. I've been tweaking it for a while, and I'm making all the tight ends and wide receivers run down the middle of the field just to distract the defenders from the running backs who are also running routes, and they are my main receivers. Here we go. Easy peasy touchdown. But this is one of the later rounds, so I'm going to have to score a second touchdown here. But the idea behind this play is the defense doesn't always assign the right guy to defend the running backs. So you hike the ball, you look left and right, read the defense, see how they're defending each of your running backs, and then you throw to the guy who has a soft defense on him. Because if they send a guy running across the field, then that's an easy completion. Or if it's a deep safety defending your running back, that's an easy first down. So this game is just really fun if you're a football fan, setting up all sorts of different plays, running the ball yourself. You can even do things like juke and room scale when you're running the ball. And I just have a blast playing this game. So once you get down to the goal line, you can just try to run it in. Won't always work though. But that's okay. I'll just chuck it to my trusty running back, and then boom, you go to the victory stands when you win all 7 games and celebrate with your fans and your team. It's really awesome actually, just being in this huge stadium in VR. So I really enjoyed playing this game, even though it might look like a pretty silly game. It's actually kind of complex and just really fun, especially if you're a football fan. Another cool thing about it is that all the achievements, you can physically see them in your trophy case in the game, which I thought was a cool feature. Anyways, that was 2MD VR Football. Let's check out the next game. This is GORN, and GORN is one of the few VR games that actually does melee combat right. So you can decapitate limbs, turn your enemies into little nuggets, and of course, decapitate their heads. The enemies in GORN try to move around using simulated physics. What that means is they respond how you would expect them to respond. Instead of just playing canned hit animations, you can, for example, throw a body at a guy and he will stumble backwards. Or you can chop off his arm, smack off his head. Bunch of crazy nunchuck wearers charging at you. Just chop off their legs and watch them beat each other up. It's an extremely bloody and brutal and hilarious game, and the combat is just extremely satisfying. On the theme of chopping off legs, you can also chop off someone's leg and then pick up the leg and beat him to death with his own severed leg. The possibilities are endless. There's all sorts of weapons you can use in this game. You can pick up weapons that enemies drop on the ground when they die and just use them to cause havoc. There's also a progression system where you can earn new weapons by doing certain things, like getting kills with a certain weapon, or getting double kills, or parries, or whatever. I don't think I've unlocked all the weapons yet, and I've been playing for many, many hours. There's also unique and hilarious boss fights. And this game is in early access, but the developer puts in a ton of work to it, puts out a ton of updates, so Lots of new bosses always coming out, new weapons like these awesome Wolverine claws, which are very satisfying to use. And probably the coolest update that's ever come out is the Attack Badger, which chews on your enemy and incapacitates them so you can take care of them. So that's GORN, definitely my favorite melee combat game. Let's move on to the next one. The last game I want to look at is Lone Echo. So Lone Echo is an Oculus exclusive game where you play as a maintenance robot on a space station. Now, two things I really love in VR are being in space and awesome locomotion techniques. This game excels at both of those things. It uses zero gravity locomotion where you push yourself around on just any surface to fly through the zero gravity environments in space. And you also use maneuvering thrusters. It also has great graphics, great voice acting and animations, and great VR interaction. So as a maintenance robot, you'll find a lot of the activities you do in this game are just running around and repairing different things. There's no combat or anything, but it still is a very satisfying and fun game to play, just because they nailed the VR interaction and pretty much every aspect of VR design. You can tell that the Facebook money that funded this game really went to good use.
Stand by. Awaiting manual confirmation. Radioactive material jettisoned.
Radiation levels returning to normal.
Thank God for that.
I find myself getting distracted by random things in this game, like floating around and chasing rocks, throwing them at other rocks, and smashing rocks together, just because everything works so well, works exactly how you'd expect it to, and it's just a pleasure to play such a well-polished and good-looking VR game. The locomotion in this game feels very natural, and that just makes everything that much more immersive. Now, on top of all the other things I mentioned, this game also has a great storyline. That being said, if you are interested in getting this game at some point and you don't want the story spoiled, then I highly recommend just closing this video right now, because shit's about to get real.
Jack! Over here! Thank God for you. It just switched on.
Captain Rhodes, sit rep, please.
The automatic release protocols aren't working. I'm wedged between the trolley and the rail. Can you see a way to get me out?
Negative. It's trapped beneath the cowl.
The access cover. If you cut through the bolts, we can get a look inside. There!
Anomaly detected. Proximity alert.
Jack?
The pulse knocked out my cutting tool.
Jack!
Rebooting.
Look! The anomaly is changing. What the hell? Jack, are you seeing? Oh my God. Shit!
Cutting tool back online.
Incoming,
Liv.
Jack! Cut the panel!
Olivia.
That's it! You got it!
Captain Rhodes.
Wait! Shit! Come on! Come on!
So, after fiddling around in the space station for a couple hours, you are faced with this massive, mysterious ship. And you go in to investigate it. And this is where the game gets really exciting. So going inside this ship and exploring this just huge, derelict, alien-infested ship is one of the coolest things that I have done in VR so far. And the immersive locomotion that just feels so good just makes it that much better. I really hope we see a lot more games that use this technique of locomotion. A, because it only really works in space, and space games are awesome, and B, just because it's pretty much flawless. It's definitely my favorite form of locomotion, and I've tried a lot of different kinds. So even though this is an Oculus exclusive game, it works just fine on Vive by using the free Revive tool, and that is how I played it. Even though I have an Oculus, I played it on the Vive, and I encountered absolutely zero issues, and it ran just fine. Now, at one point in the game, your superior officer is basically dying and her life is in your hands. And up to this point, the voice acting and animations and everything of this character have been so realistic that she almost feels like a real character, and when this happened, I pretty much felt a sense of panic that was more intense than any sense of panic I've ever felt in a video game before. So I was very impressed that the game was able to elicit a reaction like that from me.
The current will pass straight through.
Posterior electrode in place. Anterior electrode secured.
You need to pump the handle to build up a charge. When the power level reads blue, press the hollow button to administer the shock.
Charging. Clear.
No response.
Again. Clear.
Negative. Still in VFib.
Again.
Jack. We may be too late.
Clear.
Jack. She's gone.
No. Again. Clear.
Spoilers, she lives, and everyone lives happily ever after.
I have sinus rhythm. She's alive.
So that is Lone Echo, and that is my favorite VR game of 2017. It's just flawless locomotion, great graphics, great animation, voice acting, story. Pretty much everything about this game is great, and I think it's going to remain a VR classic for many years to come. So thank you for watching this video. Check out my channel if you want to see more virtual reality gameplay content. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Or if you disagreed with my choices, go ahead and leave a dislike and a comment telling me why my taste in video games is bad. Thanks a lot, have a great day, and goodbye. Hi everyone, welcome to Lone Echo. So this is a game I've been looking forward to for a while now. It takes place in space, zero gravity, so you can just toss yourself around. You can grab onto any surface and use it to move around.